Adopted. Thank you. Arrangements for the election of committee officers. May I remind colleagues that the deadline for candidate nominations for the election of committee officers for the next annual session of the Assembly is 6 p.m. Monday, July 1st, which is today. So 6 p.m. today, all the nominations need to be in for committee officers. We will now move to consider the amendments submitted to the draft resolution. 22 valid amendments have been tabled, and copies of the amendments have been made available. In discussing amendments, I will call the prosper of the amendment first, and then we'll call any opponent of the amendment. I will then ask the sponsor of the draft resolution, Mr. Winkler, for his opinion. Following that, I shall put the amendment to the vote. I ask speakers to observe a time limit of 1 minute out of respect to one another. We're also required to vote on each paragraph to which there are no amendments. To save time and to avoid any votes on items that have broad support, I hope you agree that if no amendment has been tabled to a paragraph, and if nobody requests a vote on a paragraph, we can consider it adopted. Needless to say, any time a specific vote is requested, we will do so. Are there any objections? Seeing not, the proposal is adopted. We will now take paragraphs 1 to 5 together. Does anyone want to vote on any of these paragraphs? Paragraphs 1 through 5. With no request for a vote, paragraphs 1 to 5 are agreed to. I now call on Ms. Michaud from Canada to propose Amendment 1, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 5. Ms. Michaud, you are recognized for 1 minute. Your microphone, please.
Okay. Merci, Monsieur Président. Mr. Cohen couldn't make it this morning, so I was asked to present his amendment for him. It is tragically apparent that Russia's pattern of action and intent in Ukraine is genocidal in nature. We would be well served to remember that for what it tells us about the Kremlin's true face and the human cost of falling short in supporting Ukraine in its valiant defense. We must also recall our own obligation under the 1948 Genocide Convention, which obligate the international community to act to prevent the possibility of genocide occurring, much less to stop one so evidently in progress. International law is clear in this respect. We must do more and urgently. As such, it is incumbent upon us to take every opportunity to clearly and resolutely say what is happening in Ukraine at the hands of the Russian invader. Until Ukraine has won and Russia is stopped, we must not only continue our efforts, but redouble them. Merci, colleagues. I ask you to support this amendment. Thank you.
Merci. Are there any individuals wishing to speak against the amendment? Please raise your placard. I do not see any speakers. I'll then ask Mr. Winkler, your opinion on the amendment, please.
So if there's no one against, we can agree on.
I shall now put Amendment 1 to the vote. Will all those in favor of this amendment please raise your voting card? Please hold it high so that we can count. Do you have my voting card? All in favor of Amendment 1, please hold up your voting card, and please hold it up so that we can count. Do you have my voting card? And if the Secretary of the United States, Mr. Everett, if you'd bring my voting card to the front, that'd be great. Okay. Okay, those against, please raise your voting cards. And please, thank you. And any abstentions, please raise your voting card. Thank you. The amendment is adopted. We will now take paragraphs 6 through 16 together. Does anyone want to vote on any of these individual paragraphs? With no request for a vote, paragraphs 6 to 16 are agreed to. I call Ms. Karlambides from Cyprus to propose Amendment 2, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 16. Ms. Karlambides, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I submitted this amendment because I believe that the OSCE's Mediterranean dimension is somewhat being deprioritized. The situation in the Middle East is deeply impacting neighboring states. Nuclear powers are involved in this conflict. Iran, Houthi rebels, as well as Hezbollah in Lebanon, are also part of this conflict. Security, economy, migration are significantly affected by events in the Middle East. I believe that discussing its impact, as we have done during this annual session, as well as giving more prominence to Mediterranean dimension and to our Mediterranean partners, are quite necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 2? Please raise your voting card. See not. Mr. Winkler, your opinion, please.
I would propose to support this amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 2 to the vote. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your voting card and please hold it up. I'll let you know when we finish counting. Please hold up your voting card if you're in favor of Amendment 2. Thank you. Those against the amendment, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Any abstentions, please raise your voting card. Thank you. The amendment is adopted. We will now take paragraph 17. Does anyone want to vote on paragraph 17? With no request for a separate vote, paragraph 17 is agreed to. I call Ms. Karlambides from Cyprus to propose Amendment 3, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 17. Ms. Karlambides, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to add this reference to the Amalthea Initiative because of the dire humanitarian situation of Palestine civilians and the need to provide further support. We are very thankful for the assistance provided by the United States of America in this regard, for building the floating pier, which is now being used by the ships to offload aid to be delivered to Palestinian civilians. And we are also very thankful for all other countries for their contributions. I think it is important to highlight such instances of international cooperation, especially concerning humanitarian matters. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 3? Please raise your placard. Seeing not. Mr. Winkler, your opinion, please.
I would propose to support this amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 3 to the vote. Will all those in favor of Amendment 3, please raise your voting cards and hold them until I tell you. Thank you. Those against the amendment, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Abstentions? Thank you. The amendment is adopted. We will now take paragraphs 18 and 19 together. Does anyone want to vote on either of these paragraphs? With no request for a vote, paragraphs 18 and 19 are agreed to. I call Mr. Kelly from the United States to propose, Mr. Hananyan from Armenia to propose Amendment 4, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 19. Mr. Hananyan, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we gather in Romania, located on the shores of the Black Sea, we would do well to consider the outsized importance that this region represents to security in Europe and international stability. The Black Sea has been a zone of contestation and cooperation for centuries. Cooperation is possible only when the powers of the region act in concrete to establish enforceable rules and norms. As such, the Black Sea has become not only an arena for confrontation, but also a source of regional instability and strategic condition. The security of Europe and international peace depend on a secure and prosperous Black Sea region. This Assembly must do more to center the Black Sea in our debates and policy initiatives to prevent malign actors from using this region to export destruction and disorder into Europe.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against this amendment? Please raise your placard.
Teşekkür ederim.
Mr. Chegg, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Karadeniz'in güvenliği Avrupa Atlantik güvenliği düşünüldüğü zaman her zaman benzersiz bir yer işgal eder. 1936 Montreux Sözleşmesi'nin kurduğu hassas denge ve ülkemizin sözleşmeyi titizlikle uygulaması sayesinde etkin bir tırmanma sınırlandırılması sağlamayı başardık. Son 2 yıldır Ukrayna'da da devam eden savaş bu stratejik istikrarı sınamış iddia olsa da Karadeniz bölgesinde kurulan hassas denge hala korunabilir.
Thank you very much. The security of the Black Sea has always occupied a unique place when considering Euro-Atlantic security, thanks to the delicate balance established by the 1936 Montreux Convention and our country's meticulous implementation of the convention. We have managed to provide an effective limitation to the escalations. Although the war that has been going on in Ukraine for the last 2 years has tested the strategic stability, the delicate balance established in the Black Sea region can still be preserved.
Dolayısıyla Karadeniz'den kaygı uyandıran bir bölge olarak söz etmek mümkün değildir. Kıyıdaş ülkelerin barış ve istikrar çabalarının küçümsenmemesine yol açacaktır. Bu konunun önemini akılda tutarak değerlendirilmesi rica ediyorum. Gerektiği takdirde paragrafı birlikte revize edebiliriz.
Therefore, referring to the Black Sea as a region of concern would misrepresent the reality and lead to underestimating the peace and stability efforts of the riparian countries. I kindly request you to take into consideration the importance of this issue. If needed, we could revise the paragraph together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I would propose to agree on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. I should now put amendment 4 to the vote. Would all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting card and keep it up in the air so we can count it? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card and please hold it up. Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Please raise your voting card. Thank you. The amendment is adopted. I call Mr. Guliev from Azerbaijan to propose Amendment 5 to paragraph 20. Mr. Guliev, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Yes, dear Chair, dear colleagues, the proposed amendment is more of a technical nature and intends to make the text clearer and more accurate. The rationale behind the proposal is that the agreement reached between Armenia and Azerbaijan in December 2023 includes a number of confidence-building measures. Armenia agreed to support the bid of Azerbaijan, for example, to host the COP29, the exchange of detained military servicemen, and call on the international community to support their efforts that will contribute to building mutual trust between two countries. In such a case, the reference to only one point of the agreement in the said paragraph, but not mentioning the others, should be considered as a manifestation of a selective approach. Having said that, I invite the OSCE PA to support this amendment and to vote in favor of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Mr. Handanyan from Armenia to speak against Amendment 5. You're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The issue of prisoners of war remains one of the outstanding and most sensitive issues in the normalization process between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and there are still a number of prisoners of war being held in Baku. But in this particular paragraph, the issue of prisoners of war is presented in as a result of a positive dynamic, because in December, Armenia and Azerbaijan negotiated and made a deal to return the prisoners of war from Azerbaijan to Armenia in return of agreeing on hosting the COP29 in Azerbaijan. So I am very much surprised that this positive development, Azerbaijani delegation do not want to be included in the resolution. And this is not a technical matter at all. This is a conceptual matter. And I would suggest the committee to vote against the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I would propose to vote against this amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 5 to the vote. All those in favor of Amendment 5, please raise your voting card and please hold it up in the air until I ask you to put it down. If you're in favor of Amendment 5, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Those against Amendment 5, please raise your voting card. Keep it in the air so we can count, please. Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. The amendment is defeated. We will now vote on paragraph 20. Will all those So we'll now vote on the original paragraph 20. Will all those in favor of the paragraph please raise your voting cards? All those in favor of paragraph 20, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card if you're against paragraph 20? Any abstentions, please? Paragraph 20 is agreed to. Before I call Mr. Adderholt of the United States to propose Amendment 6 to paragraph 21, I understand he would like to add the word occupied before Abkhazia and South Ossetia in his amendment, which I propose we deal with as part of the amendment rather than through the sub-amendment procedure. Mr. Adderholt, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we are requesting the change as a technical edit, which has been agreed upon by our co-sponsoring colleagues, as it reflects similar wording in the existing text.
Do you wish to speak in favor of the amendment?
Yes. It is important to highlight the Russia's continued occupation of approximately 20% of Georgia's territory, and also the destabilizing influence that it has on the Georgia and the wider region. By extension, rectifying this injustice must be a priority. However, in seeking to this end of occupation, we must not repeat past mistakes by allowing Russia to pose as a security stakeholder or as an honest broker. Russia engineered these military occupations in Georgia as it has elsewhere, and any so-called resolution under these auspices would almost certainly further Moscow's imperial interest and undermine the chances of true peace. I yield back.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 6? Mr. Samkaradze of Georgia, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Paragraph 21 explicitly calls on Russia to withdraw troops from occupied regions of Tkhinvali and Abkhazia. And we believe that the amendment that is put forward by Mr. Adderholt relativizes the Russian obstruction in Geneva international discussions. And also it uses terminology which is Tbilisi-controlled Georgia, which is unacceptable to us. And it also puts Abkhazia and South Ossetia as if they are parties to the conflict. But the conflict is between Georgia and Russia, not between Tbilisi-controlled Georgia, Abkhazia, and South Ossetia. So therefore, I ask the committee to vote against this amendment because we believe that it's not in the interests of Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you. What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I propose to support the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 6 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting cards? All those in favor of Amendment 6, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. All those against, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. The amendment is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 21 as amended. Will all those in favor of the paragraph please raise your voting card? All those in favor of paragraph 21 as amended, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Paragraph 21 as amended is agreed to. I now call Mr. Wicker of the United States to propose Amendment 7, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 21. Mr. Wicker, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I make these remarks on behalf of Senator Cardin. This will be Senator Cardin's last parliamentary assembly as he's retiring at the end of this year. His plane has not yet arrived, and so I'm making a statement on his behalf and with my wholehearted support. In recent weeks, Georgia's ruling party is engaged in increasingly open attacks on the population's democratic and Euro-Atlantic choice. This leadership has fomented attacks on civil society. Furthermore, it sought to cement its own hold on power by systematically dismantling remaining institutions. And more importantly, but not exclusively, in the government's recently enacted Russian-style foreign agent legislation. Amidst these troubling developments, the government has also taken to attacking Georgia's most reliable partners. So this body must unequivocally condemn such actions, and I urge a strong support for Senator Cardin's amendment.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 7? The representative from Georgia is recognized.
Well, first of all, I have to say that it's very saddening that Georgia's position vis-à-vis the occupation of Russian Federation of Georgian regions was not considered by the committee in the previous amendment. Now, speaking about this amendment, it's very vague, ambiguous, and misleading language. It entails groundless accusations that Georgian government actions are aligned with Kremlin. May I remind you that Georgian government has cut diplomatic relations with Russia and has no political ties with Kremlin since more than a decade. Current Georgian government has amended constitution and put EU and NATO membership as a constitutional goal. It speaks also of the law on transparency restricting freedoms of assembly and expression. Well, freedoms of assembly and expression are guaranteed by the Constitution of Georgia, and all laws which are adopted by the Parliament of Georgia undergo test of constitutionality, and this law did also, so it does not restrict in any way freedom of expression and assembly. And on this amendment talks about polarization as well. Well, yeah, I agree, there is polarization in Georgia, but I don't see reference to polarization to any other country in this assembly, which is a new normal in everywhere. So I ask the committee to vote against the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I propose to support the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 7 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Amendment 7 is adopted. We will now take paragraph 22. Does anyone want to vote on paragraph 22? With no request for a separate vote, paragraph 22 is agreed to. An oral amendment has been proposed to paragraph 23 by Mr. Morley from Norway to delete the words, quote, and territorial claims, end quote. The amendment is on the screen. In accordance with paragraph 10 of Rule 22 of our Rules of Procedure, first I'll ask whether there's any objection to the oral amendment being considered. If there is any objection, the oral amendment cannot be considered and it fails. If there is no objection, we'll proceed to consider the amendment in the same way as other amendments. That is, we will hear from the prosper of the oral amendment, one speaker against the oral amendment, and the opinion of the rapporteur. We will then decide by a simple majority vote whether to adopt the amendment. Is there any objection to the oral amendment being considered? Please raise your voting card if you object. Seeing no objection, I call the prosper to speak to the amendment. You are recognized for 1 minute. Mr. Morley from Norway.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. As I said yesterday in our meeting, it's not a time to create new problems. And from the Norwegian point of view, there are no border conflicts in the high north. There is only one dispute between good friends, United States and Canada. So that's why we want to delete the words and territorial claims. It's enough to say, expressing concern about the growing risk of geopolitical tensions in the Arctic and high north. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the oral amendment? What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I propose to agree on the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. Will those in favor of the oral amendment please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will those against please raise your voting card? Thank you. Are there any abstentions? The oral amendment is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 23 as amended. Will all those in favor of the paragraph please raise your voting card? All those in favor of paragraph 23 as amended, please raise your voting card. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Paragraph 23 as amended is agreed to. We will now take paragraphs 24 to 26 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? With no request for a vote, paragraphs 24 and 26 are agreed. I call Mr. Wicker of the United States to propose Amendment 8, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 26. Mr. Wicker, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The People's Republic of China is a growing menace to the OSCE region. I spoke to this issue yesterday and mention to my colleagues that I've begun to speak of China and Russia as part of an axis of aggression. There's no question that Beijing is providing more and more material support and political cover to enable Russia's illegal invasion of one of our sister republics. And China is not only an enabler of Russian aggression, but to some degree an accomplice. This assembly and the free world must expose China's dangerous game in the OSCE region. Like never before, China and Russia are in this together, and the amendment is designed to galvanize our commitment to thwart the kleptocracy, corruption, and malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party in cooperation with Moscow. I urge a yes vote.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 8? What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I propose to support the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 8 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 8 is adopted. We'll now take paragraph 27 to 36 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? With no request for a vote, paragraphs 27 to 36 are agreed. I now call Mr. Kelly from the United States to propose Amendment 9 to paragraph 37. Mr. Kelly, you're recognized for 1 minute.
On behalf of Senator Cornyn, what we say here today can send a powerful signal about where we stand on the gravest threats facing the OSCE region. I applaud the language in this resolution that makes clear that our words and support for Ukraine must beget timely and decisive action. This amendment ensures that we are clear about what that support must look like. Specifically, Ukraine needs a strong and consistent pipeline of financial support, arms and munitions to expel the Russian invaders and prevent them from making war on Ukraine and other peaceful states again. Our plans and promises for Ukraine's recovery and development are ultimately contingent on its survival. To realize a peaceful and prosperous future for Ukraine, we must work now to guarantee its victory. And I yield back. I ask for support of the amendment and yield back.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 9? Please raise your voting card. What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I propose to support the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 9 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. The amendment is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 37 as amended. Will all those in favor of the paragraph as amended please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Paragraph 37 as amended is agreed to. I call Ms. Michaud from Canada to propose Amendment 10, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 37. Ms. Michaud, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. L'amendement vise à tenir la Russie responsable de ces graves violations des droits de la personne et du droit international en Ukraine. Il demande d'abord aux États participants d'imposer des sanctions ciblées aux individus et aux entités responsables de l'agression russe contre l'Ukraine. Il exhorte ensuite les États participants à collaborer afin de contrer les tentatives de la Russie de se soustraire aux sanctions. Le terme ciblé est délibérément utilisé pour qualifier les sanctions. L'objectif de sanctions ciblées n'est pas de punir le peuple russe. Nous visons plutôt à nuire à la capacité de l'État russe de faire la guerre en Ukraine, notamment en limitant son accès à des composants militaires. Nous devons aussi priver la Russie des fonds dont elle a besoin pour financer sa guerre illégale et à cette fin limiter son accès aux recettes d'importation et viser les élites, les oligarques et les mandataires russes qui appuient ou permettent l'agression de la Russie contre l'Ukraine. Je vous demande donc d'appuyer cet amendement. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Merci. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 10? Please raise your voting card. What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I propose to support the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 10 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Amendment 10 is adopted. I call Ms. Michaud of Canada to propose Amendment 11, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 37. You're recognized for 1 minute.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Cet amendement encourage les États à légiférer afin que les biens des personnes et des entités qui ont été sanctionnées dans le cadre de l'agression russe contre l'Ukraine puissent être saisis et utilisés pour indemniser les victimes et soutenir la reconstruction de l'Ukraine. Selon le droit international, la Russie doit verser des réparations à l'Ukraine pour les dommages causés par sa guerre d'agression. En 2022, l'ONU a proposé l'établissement d'un mécanisme international d'indemnisation ainsi qu'un registre pour consigner les preuves et les réclamations concernant les crimes de la Russie en Ukraine. Puis un registre des dommages pour l'Ukraine a été établi par le Conseil de l'Europe et permet à des personnes, des entités et à l'État ukrainien de soumettre des demandes pour des dommages, des pertes ou des préjudices causés par la Russie. Les dirigeants du G7 ont à leur tour convenu il y a quelques semaines de se servir des intérêts des actifs gelés russes pour fournir une assistance financière à l'Ukraine. L'amendement proposé complète l'initiative du G7 et cadre avec le libellé du projet de résolution voulant que la Russie soit tenue responsable pour ses crimes commis en Ukraine. Je vous demande donc de supporter l'amendement. Merci.
Merci. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 11? Please raise your voting card. What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I propose to support.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 11 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Thank you. Any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 11 is adopted. We will now take paragraph 38 and 39 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on either of these paragraphs? With no request for a vote, paragraphs 38 and 39 are agreed to. I call Mr. Barna from Romania to propose Amendment 12, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 39. Mr. Barna, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you know, a few days ago, Moldova started a complex process to negotiate to become part of the European Union. In the same time, in this year, there will be elections for the presidency of Moldova, and it's critical the pro-European government and the President Maia Sandu remain in power to continue these critical directions. From this perspective, we consider that it's necessary any kind of support and messages that can be delivered to the Moldovan citizens are important and relevant for this period. So in the context of this aspect, I propose the amendment as it is written in our document.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 12? Please raise your voting card. What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I recommend to support this amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 12 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Amendment 12 is adopted. We will now take paragraph 40. Does anyone want to vote on paragraph 40? No request for a vote. Paragraph 40 is agreed. I call Mr. Wilson from the United States to propose Amendment 13, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 40. Mr. Wilson, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow colleagues. War criminal Putin's genocidal war in Ukraine has sadly unveiled Russia's inability to serve as an honest stakeholder for regional peace and has also laid bare a violent imperial agenda and enduring colonial legacy. Moscow's aggression against Ukraine and the wider region is a tragic outgrowth of unreconstructed imperial strategic culture. Russia has always been an empire. That legacy continues today as in its efforts to dominate its neighbors, repress the internal population, and exploit and instrumentalize vulnerable peoples abroad, particularly in the global south. Russia's failure to democratize is gruesomely a strategic culture that is inherently imperial and single-mindedly devoted to domination. Our approach to war criminal Putin must come to accept this and adapt to this. We should never underestimate Russia, much less see it democratize until we reckon that it is openly understanding its imperial orientation. I yield back.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 13? Mr. Samharaza from Georgia, you're recognized for 1 minute.
The amendment again fails to mention occupation of Georgian territories by Russia while listing war against Ukraine, annexation of Belarus, aggression against Moldova. So I propose to reformulate the amendment and after genocidal war against Ukraine, put occupation of Georgian territories and then, as it is, the text and then delete Georgian before the word Armenian. Thank you.
Thank you. The committee will suspend for just a minute while the gentleman gives us the exact wording of that oral amendment, and then we will proceed. The committee will suspend for just a moment. thank the committee's indulgence. The oral amendment will read, after Ukraine, add, and occupation of Georgian territories, and after democratic choice made by, delete Georgian and. So I'll read it again. After Ukraine, add, and occupation of Georgian territories, and then after democratic choice made by, delete Georgian and. In accordance with paragraph 10 of Rule 22 of our Rules and Procedures, the oral sub-amendment cannot be considered if there's any objection to it. Is there any objection to the oral?
Mr. Chairman, I object.
Okay, the amendment fails. What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of Amendment 13?
I propose to support the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 13 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Amendment 13 is adopted. We will now take paragraph 41. Does anyone want to vote on paragraph 41? With no request for vote, paragraph 41 is agreed to. I will call Mr. Wilson of the United States to propose Amendment 14, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 41. Mr. Wilson, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hamas, the Iranian puppet, on October 7th terrorist attack, claimed the lives of more than 1,100 Israelis, with many having dual citizenship of countries all across the OSCE, and took more than 250 hostages, unleashed a sustained regional campaign of threats and attacks against Israel that continues sadly through today. The amendment makes two important observations about the security situation Israel faces. First, it notes that Israel faces assaults from a wide range of terrorist actors, from nation states to non-states, from Sunni to Shia, from the Levant and the Gulf to from the Mediterranean to the Caspian. The thread linking all of these is the regime in Tehran. Through its proxy puppet groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthi, in addition to its client state, the Assad regime of Syria, Tehran has amassed the ability to strike Israel from multiple sides across multiple venues. Second, this amendment makes clear these threats are existential. All of these groups openly aspire to wipe Israel off the map, and they develop their capabilities with this end in mind. The Hamas Covenant of August 18, 1988, Article 7, pledges seeking out all Jews behind rocks and trees until the last Jew is found behind a rock and killed. As a result, they do distinguish between civilian and military targets. Indeed, the vast majority of the attacks are indiscriminate or targeted at civilians. In the face of these threats, we must recognize and enhance Israel's right and ability to defend itself. I yield back.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 14? Ms. Carolyn Beatties from Cyprus, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. We fully acknowledge the right of Israel to defend itself. And this is the key word, defend. Because may I remind you that when Iran attacked, they let everybody know 2 hours before that the missiles was launched. That's why there were no victims and there was no harm done. Now we are talking about Netanyahu invading Lebanon and provoking these tensions in the Middle East. So, for the sake of the Mediterranean Sea, for the sake of the Middle East, we must show restraint. It's one thing defending your right, your existence, and we all defend Israel when it comes to that, and it's another thing to attack, because Gaza is done. What's next? Lebanon? Thank you.
Thank you. What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I propose to support the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 14 to the vote. Will those in favor of the amendment please raise their voting cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 14 is adopted. The chair will clarify there was a delegate who wished to speak in addition against that amendment. According to rules of procedures, only one delegate is permitted to speak in favor and one allowed to speak against. And so because we already had a speaker against the amendment, that according to our rules and procedures, we move forward to the vote. So just for clarification. I now call on Mr. Cohen of the United States to propose Amendment 15, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 41.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wilson.
Ranking Member Cohen is unable to be here today.
Mr. Wilson, you're recognized for 1 minute. Thank you.
This amendment highlights the tragic reality of war criminal Putin's system of internal colonization. Many of our countries, the United States included, have events of imperialism, racism, or brutality that we must face and work to atone. However, in the Russian Federation, that legacy is not discussed, but denied entirely. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has launched imperial wars, sadly in Ukraine and Georgia, and engineered the soft annexation of Belarus and undermined the independence of Moldova and Armenia, threatening Estonia and Poland, among other countries. Within Russia's borders, ethnic minorities and marginalized populations include a permanent underclass and face extreme and systemic deprivation. According to recent studies, these colonial subjects are more likely to be conscripted and sent to fight and die in the genocidal war in Ukraine. A Russia that is so openly and systematically employing internal colonialism sadly will always be a threat to its neighbors and must never be an honest broker and stakeholder in Europe or Eurasia. I yield back.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 15? I recognize the gentleman from Turkey. You're recognized for 1 minute.
Evet. Değerli Başkan, değerli meslektaşlarım, ben 15. maddede söz aldım ama bir önceki maddeyle alakalı konuşacağım. İsrail'in Gazze'deki soykırımı devam ederken 40.000'e yakın insanı öldürdüğü bir ortamda İsrail'in savunma hakkından söz etmek insan haklarına da insanlık onuruna da aykırıdır diye düşünüyorum. Özellikle bunu da belirtmek istiyorum.
Distinguished Chair, thank you very much. I actually took the floor in the 15th amendment, but I would like to make a comment on the previous amendment. As Israel continues its genocide in Gaza, while more than 40,000 people are losing their lives, I do believe that speaking about the self-defense of Israel will be against the human rights and the honor of humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of Amendment 15?
I recommend to support the amendment.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 15 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 15 is adopted. An oral amendment has been proposed by Mr. Coles from Latvia to insert a new paragraph after paragraph 41. The new paragraph is on the screen, and it reads, welcome the recent initiative of Russia's State Duma and Federation Council to draft a resolution suspending Russia's participation in the OSCE EPA. In accordance with paragraph 10, rule 22 of our rules of procedure, first I will ask whether there is any objection to the oral amendment being considered. If there is an objection, the oral amendment cannot be considered and it fails. I see an objection from Dr. DeRitter of Germany. The amendment fails. We will now take paragraph 42. Does anyone want a vote on paragraph 42? With no request for a vote, paragraph 42 is agreed to. I call Mr. Famelos from Greece to propose Amendment 16 to paragraph 43. Mr. Famelos, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the initial phrasing of paragraph 43, Mr. Winkler is right to propose that to resolve conflicts in the Mediterranean region utilizing diplomatic channels and international dialogue. It's necessary. I propose the following addition. On the basis of international law, and in the case of the Turkish occupation of Cyprus, on the relevant decisions of the Security Council. Dear colleagues, there is a need to include in our resolution that international law is our basis, and to mention the illegal occupation of Cyprus territory by Turkey, which by July 20th will have completed 50 years. We should not close our eyes and avoid mentioning an illegal occupation, which continues to this day against all United Nations resolutions. If we truly want to support the resolution of conflicts and to urge all parties to intensify efforts to find a solution, we need to include this amendment. Not doing so will mean that we will be receding from already voted resolutions and undermining the principle of territorial integrity. So I kindly ask you to support the amendment, which is in line with all our long-standing international commitments, which need to be implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Mr. Öztunç of Turkey to speak against the amendment. You're recognized for 1 minute.
Evet, teşekkür ediyorum. Öncelikle değişiklik önergesini şaşkınlıkla karşıladığımı belirtmek istiyorum. Çünkü Kıbrıs'ta herhangi bir işgal yoktur. Kıbrıs sorunu bir işgal veya istila meselesi değildir. İstila iddiaları adadaki gerçeklerle ve 1960 anlaşmalarıyla uyumlu değildir. Türk askerinin adadaki varlığı Türkiye'nin garantörü güç olarak hak ve yükümlülükleri çerçevesinde 60 uluslararası anlaşmalarından kaynaklanmaktadır. Adadaki tek işgal Kıbrıs Rum tarafının 1963 yılında anayasayı ve Kıbrıs Türk halkının özden gelen haklarını açıkça ihlal ederek ortaklık devletlerinin makamlarının gaspından kaynaklanan işgaldir. Bu önergenin gerçeklerle bağı olmadığı gibi karar tasarısına Agitpa'nın çalışmalarına ve ruhuna da hiçbir katkısı yoktur. Ayrıca bu ve bu gibi önergeler Kıbrıs'ta yaşanan barış sürecinde olumsuz etkilemektedir. Değerli meslektaşlarımdan tüm bu sebeplerden dolayı değişiklik önergesine hayır oy vermelerini rica ediyorum.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to state that I'm surprised by the amendment proposal. The Cyprus problem is not a matter of occupation or invasion. Allegations of invasion are not compatible with the facts on the island and the 1960 treaties. The presence of the Turkish soldiers on the island stems from the 1960 international agreements within the framework of Turkey's rights and obligations as a guarantor power. The only occupation on the island is the one that resulted from the Greek Cypriot side's usurpation of the authorities of the Partnership Republic in 1963, in clear violation of the Constitution and the inherent rights of the Turkish Cypriot people. This proposal has no connection with the reality and doesn't contribute to the draft resolution, the work and the spirit of the OSCE EPA. Dear colleagues, for all these reasons, I ask you to vote no on this amendment proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I propose to support the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. I now put Amendment 16 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Will all those against the amendment please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 16 is adopted. We'll now vote on paragraph 43 as amended. Will all those in favor of the paragraph please raise your voting cards? All those in favor of paragraph 43 as amended, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Paragraph 43 as amended is agreed to. I call Ms. Ruska from the Republic of Moldova to propose Amendment 17, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 43. Ms. Ruska, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, we propose to insert this paragraph because when we are speaking about the conflicts in the OSCE area, it is important to not forget about Transnistrian conflict settlement and underline the crucial role of the international factor, in our case, the Parliamentary Assembly, and urging Russia to fulfill its obligation to withdraw its military presence from the territory of the Republic of Moldova. Thank you. Please support our amendment.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I propose to agree on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. I shall now put Amendment 17 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Amendment 17 is adopted. I call Mr. Zofili from Italy to propose Amendment 18, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 43. Mr. Zofili, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Dear President, on behalf of Mr. Zoffili and the Italian delegation that is supporting the amendment, we recommend enhancing the cooperation between OSCE participating states in the fight against transnational organized crime, which manages all forms of illicit trafficking, including in particular that relating to illegal migratory flows in the Mediterranean, and accumulates resources that are subsequently recycled and invested in illegal economic circuits. So we recommend for a collective and effort in order to fight this kind of illegal trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 18? What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I propose to support the amendment.
Mr. Winkler, I shall now put Amendment 18 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Amendment 18 is adopted. I call Mr. Guliev from Azerbaijan to propose Amendment 19 to paragraph 44. Mr. Guliev, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Dear Chair, dear colleagues, the rationale behind this proposal is that the parties are negotiating a document named Agreement on the Establishment of Peace and Interstate Relations, and in this regard, it is important to stick with the name of a specific document instead of referring to an unknown agreement in the mentioned paragraph. In this regard, it should also be noted that the title of the peace agreement was agreed by both countries. Having said that, I invite the Parliamentary Assembly to support this amendment and to vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I propose to support the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. I shall now put Amendment 19 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting cards? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 19 is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 44 as amended. Will all those in favor of paragraph 44 as amended please raise your voting card? All those in favor of the paragraph as amended, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Paragraph 44 as amended is adopted. We will now take paragraphs 45 to 49 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs 45 through 49? With no request for a vote, paragraphs 44 to 49 are agreed to. I call Ms. Fry from Canada to propose Amendment 20, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 49. Dr. Fry, you're recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to begin by highlighting the excellent work done in this by Mr. Winkler and the team. I think this is an excellent piece of work. Now, I want to support the inclusion of an additional paragraph in this, and this paragraph has to do with women's commitment to the Assembly for Women, Peace and Security agenda. 20 years ago, the United Nations adopted this agenda. The OSCE signaled its intent to support it and created an action plan in 2000. What us to do is to ensure that we're committed to it and that we say so in this message, because we know that when women participate in the peace process, it's 35% more likely to hold. And so we need women to be involved both in the pre-conflict, in conflict, and in post-conflict development, because women are the ones who suffer most during conflict and who are left to rebuild after. Hoping that by adopting this paragraph, we're going to reiterate our commitment to 1325 of the United Nations Resolutions for Women, Peace and Security. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fry. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 20? What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
How could I be against? So, of course, I'm in favor.
Thank you. I shall now put Amendment 20 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 20 is adopted. I now call Mr. Çelik from Turkey to propose Amendment 21 to paragraph 50. Mr. Çelik, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Değerli meslektaşlarım, AGİT üyeleri olarak karşı karşıya olduğumuz meydan okumalara ve özellikle de kutuplaşmaya karşı ortak bir duruş geliştirmek için diyaloğu ve işbirliğini teşvik eden mevcut madde önemli bir noktaya işaret ediyor. Bu konudaki ortak duruşun AGİT'in Avrupa güvenliği için önemli bir örgüt olarak kalması için de önemli olduğunu vurgulamanın yararlı olacağına inanıyorum. Teşekkür ederim.
Distinguished colleagues, the current article, which encourages dialogue and cooperation to develop a common stance against the challenges we face as OSCE members and especially against polarization, makes a very important point. I believe it will be useful to emphasize that a common stance on this issue is also important for the OSCE to remain an important organization for European security. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 21? What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I recommend to support the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. I shall now put Amendment 21 to the vote. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your voting card. Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Amendment 21 is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 50 as amended. Will all those in favor of paragraph 50 as amended, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Will all those against, please raise your voting card. Are there any abstentions? Paragraph 50 as amended is agreed to. I call Mr. Hajiani from Cyprus to propose Amendment 22, which inserts a new paragraph after paragraph 50. Mr. Hajiani, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, the launch of the Interparliamentary Forum of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly was an initial idea that I had been discussing for some time with my colleagues in the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly International Secretariat. When we decided to organize this initiative, the Interparliamentary Forum with the parliaments of Southeast Europe, we too did not imagine the great success it would have. As a result of this project, more and more parliaments have become interested in organizing the next meeting of the forum, and this is something that we should be credited with, as it will bring together the parliaments where they could learn from each other and bring their respective countries closer to each other, resulting in the strengthening of cooperation between the countries of the Western Balkans. Moreover, I would like to express my full support to the OSCE field operations in the Southeast Europe, because I have seen firsthand the incredible work they are doing and how much they have helped the countries of Southeast Europe to achieve their goals in terms of their European perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against Amendment 22? What is Mr. Winkler's opinion of the amendment?
I recommend to be in favor.
Thank you. I should now put Amendment 22 to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. Amendment 22 is adopted. We will now take paragraphs 51 to 56 together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? With no request for vote, paragraphs 51 to 56 are agreed to. An oral amendment has been proposed by the rapporteur that in paragraph 57, after as focal points, delete in these fields and add for those institutions that would be severely limited to act. So again, in paragraph 57, after as focal points, delete in these fields and add for those institutions that would be severely limited to act. In accordance with paragraph 10 of Rule 22 of our Rules of Procedure, first I'll ask whether there's any objection to the oral amendment being considered. If there's any objection, the oral amendment cannot be considered and it fails. If there is no objection, we will proceed to consider the amendment in the same way as other amendments. That is, we will hear from the proposer of the amendment, one speaker against the oral amendment, and the opinion of the rapporteur. We will then decide by a simple majority vote whether to adopt the oral amendment. Is there any objection to the oral amendment being considered as proposed by our rapporteur? Then I call on Mr. Winkler to speak on his amendment. You're recognized for 1 minute.
Dear colleagues, as I recognize, paragraph 57 may have led to some misunderstanding. So the OSCE EPA, of course, supports the finding of consensus for the appointment of the next 4 high posts: the Secretary General, the Director of ODIHR, High Commissioner on National Minorities, and Representative of Freedom of the Media. Of course, if there is a lack or a gap between, we are ready and stand by to support the executive branch. In this, this is paragraph 57. Here it's clear to clarify that we do it especially on the posts like High Commissioner on National Minorities and Representative of Freedom of Media, because they have no substitute. That means if these posts are not filled, we need someone who can get vocal, and this is precisely on this. Therefore, I like to add the sentence, those institutions that would be severely limited to act. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. Does anyone wish to speak against the oral amendment? I shall now put the oral amendment to the vote. Will all those in favor of the amendment please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Does the delegate from Latvia wish to vote no? Okay. Are there any abstentions? The oral amendment is adopted. We will now vote on paragraph 57 as amended. Will all those in favor of paragraph 57 as amended please raise your voting card? Thank you. Will all those against please raise your voting card? Are there any abstentions? Paragraph 57 as amended is agreed to. That concludes the consideration of amendments. Thank you very much. We will now formally move to a vote on the resolution, draft resolution as amended. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended please raise your voting cards? Thank you. With those against, please raise your voting cards. Thank you. Are there any abstentions? The draft resolution as amended is adopted. We will now move to consideration of the first supplementary item referred to us by the Standing Committee, countering the proliferation of drugs, particularly fentanyl and other synthetic opioids, as well as mafias and criminal organizations involved in trafficking them, which is supplementary item number 3. There are no amendments to this item. I give the floor to Mr. Zoffili from Italy, the sponsor of the amendment. Mr. Zoffili, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Grazie Presidente Hudson, stimati colleghi. Supplementary item che ho deciso di proporre e portare all'esame dell'Assemblea affronta temi di particolare rilevanza e urgenza sia dal punto di vista della salvaguardia della salute pubblica a livello globale sia da quello della lotta all'attività alle organizzazioni criminali. La diffusione del fentanyl e di altri opioidi sintetici, come sapete, ha causato una grave emergenza sanitaria negli Stati Uniti ed ora queste sostanze si stanno diffondendo anche in altri paesi con conseguenze pericolose e letali sulla salute dei cittadini, soprattutto i più giovani, in generale sulle comunità, dal momento che la loro diffusione è supportata da organizzazioni criminali internazionali. È quindi fondamentale che anche la nostra organizzazione affronti questa nuova sfida alla sicurezza e alla legalità con determinazione e unità. Le organizzazioni criminali transnazionali giocano un ruolo cruciale in questa crisi. Reti sofisticate sono coinvolte nella produzione, nel traffico e nella distribuzione del fentanyl e di altri oppioidi sintetici, operando su scala globale e sfruttando le lacune nei sistemi di controllo e regolamentazioni internazionali. La loro capacità di adattarsi rapidamente ai cambiamenti del mercato e di utilizzare nuove tecnologie come il dark web per eludere le forze dell'ordine rende la lotta contro il traffico di oppioidi sintetici una sfida estremamente complessa. Le attività di queste organizzazioni criminali non solo alimentano la dipendenza e la morte, ma destabilizzano anche le comunità, generando un forte turbamento sociale. Pertanto, affrontare la diffusione del fentanyl e degli altri oppioidi sintetici richiede un approccio multidimensionale che combini interventi sanitari, enforcement delle leggi ed una sinergica cooperazione internazionale, sia per tutelare chi ne è vittima da dipendenza, sia per gestire le conseguenze di questo fenomeno da un punto di vista della sicurezza e della sanità. La nostra Assemblea, cari colleghi, attraverso l'adozione di questo supplementary item, può iniziare a definire un percorso condiviso volto a guidare gli sforzi di tutti noi Paesi partner. La parola chiave nel meccanismo di approccio al tema è e deve essere la cooperazione, che per noi parlamentari si traduce in diplomazia parlamentare, volta a far crescere la consapevolezza delle istituzioni verso l'insorgere di questa vera e propria emergenza. Agli sforzi comuni vanno altresì aggiunti gli impegni nazionali. Pertanto invitiamo gli Stati partecipanti a migliorare, a rafforzare i propri assetti legislativi in materia. Cari colleghi, è solo attraverso un impegno collettivo e coordinato che possiamo approcciarci e gestire insieme questa crisi e anche in qualità di rappresentante speciale per la lotta alla criminalità organizzata la individuo come nostra priorità. Conto, Presidente Hudson e colleghi, sul vostro sostegno per adottare questa risoluzione e per lavorare insieme verso un futuro più sicuro e più sano per tutti. Grazie di cuore.
Thank you. As there are no registered speakers, we will now move to decisions on the draft resolution. We are required to vote on every paragraph to which there are no amendments. As we have agreed previously to save time and to avoid many votes on items that have broad support, I hope that you agree that if no amendment has been tabled to a paragraph and if nobody requests a vote on a paragraph, we can consider it adopted. Needless to say, anytime a specific vote is requested, we will do so. There are no amendments to this item, so we'll now take paragraphs 1 through 16 together. Does anyone want a vote on any of these paragraphs? With no request for a vote, paragraphs 1 to 16 are agreed. We will now formally move to a vote on the draft resolution. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution please raise your voting card? All in favor of the resolution? Thank you. Would those against please raise your voting card? Thank you. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. The draft resolution is adopted. Thank you. We will continue our consideration of other supplementary items this afternoon. This concludes our morning session. Thank you all for a very productive session. We stand adjourned.